Hi, my name is Talons Green, and I read The Stranger Beside Me, which is an autobiography about Ted Bundy, written by Ann Rule. Do you think you really know the people around you? Ann Rule spent years with Ted Bundy as a co-worker. She explained him as a normal and kind-hearted person. Little did she know he was one of the most disgusting human beings and serial killers we've ever seen. Summary. Ann Rule backgrounds her relationship with Bundy as they worked together as a homicide documentation professional for Seattle's police department. Although the pay wasn't great, she took the job after a recent divorce to support her 4 children. Rule's first impression of Ted Bundy was described as an extremely bright young man in his 20s, recently out of college and soon headed for law school, and successful career in the making. Ted Bundy's specialty in his occupation was talking people out of suicide on a crisis lifeline. He did various different volunteer work to continue to help those struggling with insane conditions and terrible mental health. Ann Rule and Ted Bundy never really crossed paths outside of work, all until Ted Bundy started to help her as a resource of someone to talk to about her tragic divorce and rough family matters. Around the few years which Ann Rule and Ted Bundy worked together, states in the Northwest like Oregon and Washington were hit with various different mysterious murders, specifically the murders of young women. As more and more murders began to arise, Ann Rule's primary workforce turned to documenting these crimes and their investigations. Little did she know who was behind all of this. Ann Rule began to align her evidence and gradually began to get the idea that the evidence aligned with Bundy. She questioned herself so much if that would even be possible, considering she would never picture Bundy doing such terrible acts. As Ann Rule began to give more attention to the possibility of the suspect being Ted Bundy, she informed her colleagues at the Seattle Police Department that Bundy could have been behind the scenes of the murders of young women. After this, Bundy began to drift away from work and ultimately lose contact from Ann Rule. The frequent crimes of this matter in the Pacific Northwest began to simmer down, but instantly arose in Utah and Colorado, where the majority of these murder scenes took place. These murder scenes were described as insanely disgusting and cruel, as the target was young women, typically around the ages of college girls. Typically, these murders were during the middle of the night. No murder weapon was typically used, just hands and gruesome acts of strangling and sexual assault. The escape. Bundy would use his ability to talk in a polite and well-spoken manner to pass off as quiet and a nice guy. The more Bundy began to terrorize areas like the Pacific Northwest, Colorado, and Utah, a sketch of Bundy was released and the police received tons of calls saying they had identified the killer. Bundy was stopped during a traffic violation, which led to the searching of his car. They found items like a crowbar, ski mask, and handcuffs, and a lot more gruesome items. He was then arrested a year later for attempted kidnapping and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Months later, he was charged with the murder of Karen Campbell. Bundy intentionally lost a ton of weight in prison and slipped through the bars, which led to him jumping out of a 2-story window and vanishing. He was eventually captured again roughly 15 days later, but had escaped again. Between both of the escapes, he led gruesome and disgusting murders. After his second escape, he fled to Florida, where he broke into a sorority house in Florida State University and murdered 2 more young women. And it was also said that before he had went into the sorority house, he had picked up a log, and that's how he murdered these women. Final arrest and terrifying facts. Bundy's final murder was a 12-year-old girl in Tallahassee, Florida, whom he raped and killed. He fled across the Florida state border and was arrested for stolen plates. Little did the officer know he had just arrested the FBI's top suspect at the time. The only few survivors of Bundy said he had a dark side where he completely turned into a monster and had this terrifying demonic look in his eyes. There was also only one survivor. He took pleasure in how scared his victims were. He confessed to over 30 murders, but other documentaries and experts say it could have been well over 100. Ted Bundy decapitated 12 of his victims and kept their heads as souvenirs. He targeted brunettes due to his ex-girlfriend Brittany Burnett. He traveled in his notorious slug bug and had seats removed in order to hide bodies easier. Connections. The closest thing that I could picture to Ted Bundy and his murders was Jeffrey Dahmer. The Stranger Beside Me relates to the Netflix documentary show Dahmer Monster, which highlights the horrible and terrifying acts of Jeffrey Dahmer. Ann Rule's book The Stranger Beside Me and Netflix's Dahmer Monster both outline how crazy people can really be and how mentally ill serial killers are. Both of these individuals strived on the pain and suffering of others. Although Dahmer targeted gay young men, and he would attack once the drugs he had laced them with began to kick in, rather than Bundy, as he would target younger women and fiercely kill them with his bare hands while they were still in a perfect state of mind. Academic response. Personally, I'd say this book is grammatically easy to read. Ann Rule uses her own writing techniques consisting of storytelling and investigative journalism. She keeps the book very interesting as she goes step by step at a time, having us portray the future in our own brains. She uses personal experience to also gain better attention from the reader. But in order to read this book, you must be very prepared to hear the details of the cruel and disgusting acts throughout Bundy's life. This book is not for someone who does not like true crime or anything horror-related. Personal opinion. This book attempts to attract readers that are heavily into true crime, psychology, serial killers, insanity, and the human mind. I highly recommend this book if you are the type of person to ask the question, who would do such a thing? Before I read this book, I questioned why serial killers could do such terrible acts. Ann Rule did a great job reshaping my perspective on mental illness and how crazy these people are. It is hard to comprehend how someone can do such things, but it is all due to crazy mental insanity that can be out of their control. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, although it gave me the chills a few more times than I had expected. Thank you.